On a quiet morning in rural Georgia, Elijah Cross is just fixing a fence post, his wife tending chickens, his son loading feed. Then, 3 sheriff's deputies roll up uninvited, shoving his wife, slamming his son against a wall, and threatening to take him away on bogus charges. They think Elijah is just another farmer. They don't know about the missions, the classified operations, the years he spent dismantling enemies who thought they held all the power. But when the dust settles that day, Elijah's real battle is only beginning, because the deputies aren't acting alone. Now, with everything on the line, Elijah must decide. Does he fight back in the open, or take the war to their doorstep the way only a Delta Force commander can? Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The morning sun painted long shadows across the Cross family farm, its golden rays catching dewdrops on the fresh-cut grass. Elijah Cross stood at the fence line, his strong hands working methodically as he secured a loose post. Years of farm work had weathered his dark skin, but couldn't mask the disciplined way he moved, each motion precise and purposeful. "Hand me that level, son," Elijah called out to Caleb, who was stacking feed bags near the barn entrance. Caleb jogged over, his sneakers kicking up bits of dirt. He grabbed the tool from the toolbox and handed it to his father with an exaggerated military salute. "Here you go, Commander, sir," he said with a grin. Elijah shook his head, trying to hide his smile. "At ease, soldier. And it's just plain old farmer now." "Oh, please," Denise called from the chicken coop, where she was gathering eggs into a woven basket. "You still jump out of bed at 500 hours like clockwork. Some habits never change." The morning air carried the rich scent of earth and hay, mingling with the familiar barnyard smells that had become home to the Cross family. In the distance, their cattle grazed peacefully, black dots against the green pasture that stretched toward the tree line. "The county fair committee called yesterday," Denise said, making her way toward them. She wore her usual work clothes, sturdy jeans and a plaid shirt with the sleeves rolled up. "They want us to bring extra produce this year. Said our tomatoes were the hit of the summer last time. Those raised beds you designed are paying off." Elijah nodded, checking the fence post with his level. "Military precision in the garden too, right, honey?" "I swear. Dad measures the spacing between plants with a ruler," Caleb said, leaning against the fence. "It's like vegetable boot camp out there." They all laughed, the sound carrying across their property. Birds chirped in the oak trees that lined their driveway, adding to the morning chorus. "Speaking of the fair," Denise continued, "we should start picking out which animals to show. The Jensen's girl is bringing her prize pig again, but I think our new heifer has a real shot this year." Elijah stepped back to admire his handiwork on the fence. "What do you think about entering some of your photos this time, Caleb? Those sunset shots you took last week were something special." Caleb shuffled his feet, suddenly interested in a clump of grass. "Maybe. Though Matt Hopkins always wins the photography category." "Because his daddy's the head judge," Denise said, setting down her basket. "But your work is twice as good, baby. Don't let that stop you." The morning light strengthened, burning away the last wisps of fog that clung to the lower fields. Their farm had been in Denise's family for 4 generations, each acre holding memories and stories. Elijah had fallen in love with both her and the land when he'd first returned from overseas, trading his combat boots for work boots without hesitation. "We need to finish up the north field today," Elijah said, walking toward the toolbox. "Weather report says rain coming in tomorrow." "I'll help after I finish my online classes," Caleb offered. He'd been doing hybrid learning since the pandemic, splitting time between school and farm work. "That reminds me," Denise said. "Principal Watson asked if we'd donate some vegetables for the school's food drive next month." "Of course we will," Elijah nodded. "Might as well share the bounty." The morning was warming up now, promising another Georgian scorcher. Caleb wiped his forehead with his sleeve before returning to his feed-stacking duties. The barn's old wood gleamed honey gold in the sunlight, its red paint faded, but still proud. Elijah watched his son work, noting how the boy's movements had grown more assured over the past year. No longer the gangly teenager who used to trip over his own feet, Caleb was developing into a young man who carried himself with quiet confidence. "Remember when he used to be scared of the chickens?" Denise whispered, coming up beside her husband. "Now look at him, running this place like he was born to it," Elijah replied softly, pride evident in his voice. The peaceful moment was interrupted by a distant sound. Tires on gravel. Elijah's posture shifted subtly, his shoulders squaring, as his eyes fixed on the dirt road leading to their property. The sound grew louder, accompanied by rising dust clouds. 3 white sheriff's department vehicles appeared around the bend, their light bars dark, but their presence heavy with unspoken intent. Elijah's expression hardened as he set down his tools, years of tactical assessment kicking in automatically. The dust billowed higher as the vehicles approached, their tires crunching steadily on the gravel road. The patrol cars rolled to a stop in a cloud of red Georgia clay. 3 deputies emerged, their badges catching the morning sun. Deputy Roy Carver led the way, his hand resting deliberately on his belt. Deputies Mason and Hawthorne flanked him, spreading out in a practiced formation that made Elijah's military instincts buzz with warning. "Morning, folks," Carver drawled, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Got some reports we need to look into. Stolen farm equipment showing up in the county. Illegal livestock sales. You know how it is." Denise stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. "There must be some mistake. We keep detailed records of all our equipment and sales. I can show you—" "Ma'am, step aside!" Mason cut her off, already moving toward the barn. His boots kicked up dust as he shouldered past her, making her stumble. "Hey!" Caleb moved quickly, positioning himself between Mason and the barn door. "You can't just barge in here. Don't you need a warrant or something?" Hawthorne's massive frame loomed over Caleb. "Boy, you better watch your mouth." Without warning, he grabbed Caleb's arm and slammed him against the barn's wooden wall. The impact made the whole structure shudder. "Get your hands off my son!" Denise rushed forward, maternal instinct overriding caution. Hawthorne's response was immediate and brutal. He shoved her hard, sending her sprawling onto the packed dirt. Elijah watched it all unfold, his body perfectly still save for his eyes, which tracked every movement with laser focus. His hands hung loose at his sides, but his fingers twitched almost imperceptibly. Years of training screamed at him to act, but experience kept him rooted, assessing, waiting. "This is private property," Elijah stated, his voice carrying across the yard with quiet authority. "If you have concerns, we can discuss them professionally." "Shut it!" Carver snapped, stalking closer. "Your boy here is resisting a legal investigation. That's grounds for arrest in this county." Mason was already pawing through some equipment near the barn entrance. "Look what we got here," he called out, pointing to a perfectly ordinary tractor part. "Serial numbers look suspicious to me." "That's ridiculous," Caleb protested, still pinned against the wall. "We bought that new last month. We have the receipt right in the—" Hawthorne twisted Caleb's arm harder, making him grunt in pain. "Nobody asked you to speak." Denise pushed herself up from the ground, dirt staining her jeans. There was a small cut on her cheek where she'd hit the ground. "This is harassment, plain and simple. We've lived here for generations, never had any trouble until—" "Until what, Mrs. Cross?" Carver's hand moved to his handcuffs. "Until you folks forgot your place?" The morning that had started so peacefully now felt charged with dangerous electricity. Birds had stopped singing. Even the livestock seemed to sense the tension, the cattle gathering at the far end of their pasture. "Last warning," Mason announced, pulling out his own cuffs. "Either the boy comes quietly, or we add assaulting an officer to the charges." "I didn't assault anybody." Caleb's voice cracked with fear and anger. "You're the ones who—" Hawthorne yanked him away from the wall, twisting both arms behind his back. The handcuffs clicked shut with metallic finality. "Please," Denise begged, her voice breaking. "He's just 17. Whatever you think we did, save it for the judge," Carver smirked, opening the back door of his patrol car. "Maybe a night in county lockup will teach him some respect." Elijah still hadn't moved from his spot, but something had changed in his stance. The casual farmer was gone, replaced by something else, something that made the air around him seem colder, more dangerous. Hawthorne started shoving Caleb toward the waiting car. The boy stumbled, his sneakers scraping against the gravel. Tears of frustration and fear streaked his face. "Watch your head," Mason taunted, pushing Caleb's head down toward the car door. That's when Elijah's voice cut through the morning air like a blade through silk. Low, measured, carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Let my son go." Carver let out a harsh laugh that echoed across the farmyard. "Or what, farmer? You gonna make us?" He gestured at Hawthorne, who responded by twisting Caleb's arm even harder, making the boy gasp in pain. Something shifted in Elijah's eyes. The change was subtle, like a shadow passing over still water, but profound. His shoulders straightened almost imperceptibly, and his weight settled differently on his feet. 30 seconds, Elijah said, his voice carrying the same tone he'd used giving orders in combat zones. "That's how long you have to release my son and leave my property." Mason snorted, moving to flank Carver. "You threatening officers of the law?" His hand drifted toward his weapon. "I'm giving you a choice," Elijah replied evenly. "The smart one." Hawthorne started shoving Caleb toward the patrol car again. "Shut up and watch your boy take a ride downtown." Elijah moved. Later, Denise would struggle to describe exactly what happened. One moment, her husband was standing still as stone. The next, he was pure liquid motion. He covered the distance to Hawthorne in 2 smooth strides. His first move was so fast it seemed impossible. A precise strike to Hawthorne's wrist that made the deputy's hand spasm open, releasing Caleb. Before Hawthorne could react, Elijah had already swept the bigger man's legs out from under him. The deputy crashed to the ground with a heavy thud that shook dust from the dirt. Mason drew his weapon, but Elijah was already there. A twist of Mason's wrist sent the gun flying. Another fluid movement, and Mason's face met the hood of his own patrol car with enough force to leave a dent. The deputy slumped to the ground, conscious but dazed. Carver managed to get his gun halfway out of its holster before Elijah reached him. A precise strike to the deputy's elbow, followed by a sweep that took his feet out from under him. Carver hit the ground hard, and suddenly Elijah was on top of him, one knee pressed against his chest, the deputy's own weapon now in Elijah's steady hand. The entire sequence had taken less than 5 seconds. "What the hell?" Carver wheezed, struggling to breathe under the pressure of Elijah's knee. "How did you—" 20 seconds left, Elijah cut him off. His voice remained eerily calm, but there was steel beneath the words. "I suggest you use them wisely." Denise stood frozen by the barn, one hand pressed to her mouth. She'd known about Elijah's military background, of course, but seeing it in action was something else entirely. This wasn't her gentle husband who sang while working in the garden. This was the Delta Force commander who'd led elite missions in places they weren't allowed to discuss. Caleb had managed to stumble away from the patrol car, his handcuffed wrists awkward behind him. His eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and awe as he watched his father hold 3 armed deputies at bay, without breaking a sweat. "Keys!" Elijah commanded, pressing slightly harder with his knee. Now! Carver fumbled at his belt with shaking hands, producing a ring of keys. Elijah plucked them smoothly from his grasp and tossed them to Denise, who quickly moved to free Caleb. 10 seconds, Elijah announced. The morning sun cast his shadow long across the dirt, making him seem larger than life. I won't repeat myself. Mason was pushing himself up from the ground, blood trickling from his nose. Hawthorne had rolled onto his side, still struggling to catch his breath. Neither made any move toward their weapons. "You're dead," Carver spat, though his voice trembled. "When the sheriff hears about this—" 5 seconds. Elijah's thumb clicked the safety off Carver's gun with deliberate slowness. "Would you like to waste them on threats?" The click seemed to break something in the deputy's resolve. Mason scrambled to his feet, practically dragging Hawthorne up with him. Carver squirmed until Elijah released him, then Crabbe walked backward before finding his footing. "Time's up," Elijah said softly. He ejected the magazine from Carver's gun, then the round in the chamber, before tossing the empty weapon at the deputy's feet. "Drive carefully now." The deputies piled into their vehicles with none of their earlier swagger. Engines roared to life, tires spun in the Georgia clay, and 3 patrol cars peeled out of the Cross family farm like the devil himself was chasing them. Elijah stood in the yard, watching until the last trail of dust settled on the horizon. His posture was still alert, ready, scanning for any sign of their return. The morning birds slowly resumed their singing, but the tension in the air hadn't fully dissipated. With measured steps, he walked back to the farmhouse porch, positioning himself where he had a clear view of the road. His eyes remained fixed on that distant curve where the deputies had disappeared, his expression unreadable, but his body coiled with latent energy. Inside the farmhouse, Denise's hands shook slightly as she measured coffee grounds into the filter. The familiar routine helped steady her nerves, but she couldn't stop glancing at Elijah, who sat at the kitchen table with his phone in his hand. His posture was still alert, military straight, though his expression had softened somewhat since they'd come inside. "You sure about this?" Denise asked, watching water drip into the pot. "Calling him directly?" "Tom Garvey needs to understand exactly what he's dealing with," Elijah replied, his thumb hovering over the contact. "And who he's dealing with." Caleb sat at the table across from his father, rubbing his wrists where the handcuffs had left red marks. "You know the sheriff? Like, personally?" "We served together. Hurricane relief in Florida, about 15 years back." Elijah's voice was matter-of-fact, but his eyes held something harder. "Before that, well, that's classified." He pressed the call button and put the phone on speaker. It rang 3 times before a gravelly voice answered. "Cross? Been a while." "Not long enough, Tom." Elijah's tone was measured, controlled. "We need to discuss what just happened on my property." There was a pause, then, "My deputies reported a disturbance." "Your deputies assaulted my wife and son without cause or warrant," Elijah cut in. "They're lucky to have walked away." Denise set 3 mugs of coffee on the table, her hand lingering on Elijah's shoulder. The touch seemed to ground him. "Now hold on," Garvey's voice crackled through the speaker. "They were investigating." "Spare me the bull about stolen equipment," Elijah said. "We both know that's not what this was about. Your boys came looking for trouble, Tom. They found it." Another pause, longer this time. When Garvey spoke again, his folksy charm had hardened into something more calculating. "You put 3 of my deputies in the dirt, Cross. That's assault on law enforcement. Is that what they told you?" Elijah's laugh held no humor. "Ask them who drew weapons first. Ask them who threw a woman to the ground and tried to drag away a minor without cause." He leaned closer to the phone. "Better yet, ask them if they want to try it again." Caleb watched his father with a mixture of pride and amazement. He'd never heard this edge in his voice before. never seen this side of him. "You threatening my department, Cross? I'm giving you one warning, as a courtesy for old times' sake." Elijah's fingers drummed once on the table, then went still. "Keep your deputies off my land. This stops now." "Or what?" "Or I'll consider it a hostile action," Elijah said simply, "and respond accordingly." The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Denise could almost hear Garvey weighing his options, remembering exactly who he was dealing with. Finally, the sheriff's voice returned, tight with forced calm. "I'll talk to my men. Make sure there's no misunderstanding." "Do that." Elijah's tone made it clear the conversation was ending. "And Tom, if anything happens to my family, there won't be another phone call." He ended the call, the kitchen falling quiet except for the soft ticking of the wall clock and the distant sound of wind in the oak trees outside. Caleb stared at his father, questions burning in his eyes. "Dad, what you did out there? How? I mean, those moves were like something from an action movie." Denise sat down with her own coffee, wrapping both hands around the warm mug. She'd known parts of Elijah's past, but there was clearly more she'd never asked about. Elijah took a long sip of coffee before answering. "Your dad used to do a different kind of farming, overseas." His voice was gentle now, almost apologetic. "The kind that involved protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. But that was—" Caleb gestured vaguely. "I mean, you were like a ninja out there." "Delta Force," Elijah corrected quietly. "We trained to end fights before they began. To be precise, efficient." He reached across the table and squeezed his son's hand. "I never wanted to use those skills here. Not in our home. I'm glad you could, though," Caleb said softly. "When they grabbed me, I was scared. But then you just—" He mimicked a quick hand motion, grinning despite himself. "Let's hope we never need those skills again," Denise said. But she smiled, too, the tension finally starting to leave her shoulders. They moved around the kitchen together, falling into their usual rhythm as Denise prepared sandwiches for a late lunch. The familiar routine felt good, grounding after the chaos of the morning. Elijah helped slice tomatoes from their garden, while Caleb set the table, their movements natural and unhurried. As they sat down to eat, the farmhouse was peaceful again. Through the kitchen window, the dirt road stretched empty and quiet under the afternoon sun. The only movement was butterflies drifting over Denise's flower garden and a few chickens scratching in the yard. They ate together, talking about normal things, the county fair coming up, Caleb's history project, the new calf in the barn. The morning's violence felt distant now, like a bad dream fading in the warmth of day. The warm evening air had settled over the Cross farm like a blanket, bringing with it the chirping of crickets and the gentle rustling of leaves. Inside the farmhouse, Denise hummed softly as she wiped down the kitchen counters, the familiar motion helping to ease the last remnants of tension from the morning's confrontation. The dishes clinked quietly in the sink as she worked, accompanied by the muffled beat of music drifting down from Caleb's room upstairs. On the front porch, Elijah sat in his favorite rocking chair, a well-worn paperback in his hands. But his eyes kept drifting from the pages to scan the darkened property, a habit born from years of training that he'd never quite shaken. The porch light cast a yellow glow that pushed back the darkness, creating a small circle of visibility around the house. The peaceful evening shattered in an instant. A truck engine roared on the road, too fast and too loud. Elijah's body tensed before his mind could process why. Then came the sharp crack of gunfire. Pop, 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 and the horrible sound of glass exploding inward. "Get down!" Elijah shouted, already moving. He burst through the front door as bullets punched through windows, sending deadly shards flying. Denise screamed from the kitchen. "Mom!" Caleb's voice carried from upstairs, panic-stricken. Elijah crossed the space to Denise in 3 long strides, grabbing her arm and pulling her to the floor. They pressed against the kitchen cabinet as another shot rang out, this one taking out the window above the sink. Glass rained down, tinkling against the metal sink and scattering across the floor. "Stay down," Elijah commanded, his voice carrying the sharp edge of command. "Caleb, don't move." The truck's engine faded into the distance, leaving behind the acrid smell of gunpowder and the sound of Denise's rapid breathing. For a long moment, no one moved. Elijah's hand stayed firm on Denise's shoulder, his body partially shielding hers as he listened intently for any sign the attackers might return. "Is everyone okay?" he called out, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "I'm fine," Caleb shouted back, his voice shaky. "They didn't hit up here." Denise nodded against Elijah's shoulder, unable to find her voice just yet. Her hands trembled as she gripped his arm. "Stay where you are," Elijah ordered. He moved in a low crouch to the wall, pressing his back against it as he made his way to the window. Glass crunched under his boots with each careful step. The night outside had gone quiet again, but it wasn't the peaceful quiet of before. This silence felt hostile, watchful. Elijah's eyes, already adjusted to the darkness, scanned the property methodically. The truck was long gone, leaving only tire tracks in the dirt road and bullet holes in their home. "Caleb," he called up, "stay in your room until I clear the house. Denise, kitchen corner, away from windows." Moving with practiced efficiency, Elijah checked each room, each closet, each possible point of entry. The routine came back to him like muscle memory. Clear corners, check sight lines, secure the perimeter. When he was certain the immediate threat had passed, he allowed his family to move. Caleb practically flew down the stairs, his face pale in the dim light. He hugged his mother tight as she emerged from the kitchen corner, both of them trembling slightly. "I need to check outside," Elijah said, his voice gentler now, but still carrying authority. "Stay away from the windows. Caleb, help your mother clean up the glass, but be careful." The night air felt different as Elijah stepped onto the porch, heavier somehow. He moved silently across the yard, checking the bullet trajectories, marking where shells had hit. The attack hadn't been precise. Wild shots meant to terrorize rather than kill. That thought didn't make him feel any better. At the gate, something white caught his eye. A piece of paper, pinned to the wooden post with a hunting knife. Elijah approached cautiously, scanning for tripwires or other threats before retrieving the note. The message was short, written in rough block letters. "This is our county. You'll learn your place." Back on the porch, Elijah found an old metal pail they used for farm odds and ends. He emptied it, placed it on the concrete, and dropped the note inside. A match flared in the darkness as he lit it, the small flame casting dancing shadows across his face. He dropped it onto the paper, watching as the threatening words curled and blackened. His jaw tightened as he stared into the flames, the orange light reflecting in his eyes. The fire consumed the note quickly, leaving only ashes and the echo of a threat. Elijah didn't speak. Didn't need to. The set of his shoulders and the hardness in his expression said everything about what would come next. The pail's metal sides glowed softly in the dark, as the last bits of paper turned to ash, carrying away any illusion that this fight was over. The morning sun filtered through the broken windows, now covered with sheets of plywood. Elijah sat at the kitchen table, his coffee growing cold in front of him. His fingers traced the bullet holes in the wall behind him. 3 neat circles punched through the drywall, a constant reminder of last night's attack. The phone rang, breaking the heavy silence. Elijah checked the caller ID. Major Allen Price, his old contact from North Carolina. He hadn't heard from Price in months. "Price," Elijah answered, his voice low and controlled. Cross. Price's familiar, gravelly voice came through clear and urgent. Got some intel you need to hear? You sitting down? Been sitting all morning. Elijah's hand tightened around the coffee mug. What have you got? Those deputies who came at you yesterday, it's not random. Been making calls since I heard what happened. Price paused, and Elijah could hear papers shuffling. Your sheriff's department is neck-deep in something ugly. They're part of a coordinated operation targeting black-owned farms across 3 counties. Elijah's jaw clenched. Land seizures? Bingo! They create problems. Fake citations, trumped-up charges, property liens. Then their developer friends swoop in when farmers can't fight back anymore. Price's voice hardened. Your farm's on their list, Cross. Has been for months. Denise walked into the kitchen, catching the tension in Elijah's posture. She stopped, watching his face carefully. Who's backing it? Elijah asked, meeting Denise's eyes. Local politicians, business developers, few judges in their pocket. Sheriff Garvey's running point on the enforcement side. Price cleared his throat. Remember that disaster relief operation where you met him? Yeah. Well, seems he learned the wrong lessons about power. He's built himself quite the network. They've already forced out 4 families this year alone. Elijah stood, moving to the window. Through the plywood slats, he could see Caleb in the barn, going about his morning chores like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. This isn't just about us anymore, Elijah said quietly. No, it's not. And Price's voice dropped lower. These people, they're used to getting their way. When intimidation doesn't work, they get creative. Real creative. Appreciate the heads up, Price. Watch your 6, Commander. I'll keep digging on my end. The line went dead. Elijah set the phone down carefully. Too carefully, like it might explode. Denise moved closer, her hand finding his shoulder. What is it? It's bigger than we thought. Elijah turned to face her. The sheriff, the deputies, they're running a scheme to force black farmers off their land. We're just the latest target. Dear God. Denise sank into a chair. The other families at church who lost their farms. Yeah. Elijah's voice was tight. It wasn't bad luck or bad management. It was them. So what do we do? Denise straightened her spine, meeting his gaze directly. We can't just wait for the next attack. No, we can't. Elijah walked to the kitchen window, watching Caleb stack hay bales with the same precision he'd taught him. This isn't something we can handle with just quick reactions anymore. We need a plan, a real strategy, like you used to make. It wasn't a question. Similar. Elijah nodded slowly. But this is different. We're not just protecting our family now. This is about justice for everyone they've hurt. Denise stood, moving to join him at the window. Then we'll fight them. The right way. It won't be easy. Elijah glanced at her. These people have power, connections. They're used to winning. So were the people you used to fight. Denise's voice carried steel beneath its softness. Didn't stop you then. A ghost of a smile touched Elijah's lips. No, it didn't. The day passed in a blur of repairs and planning. As the sun began to set, Elijah walked the fence line of his property, each step measured and purposeful. The golden light painted long shadows across the fields his family had worked for generations. He paused at the corner post, running his hand over the weathered wood. His eyes swept over the land. The barn where his father had taught him to mend tools, the oak tree where he'd built Caleb's first swing, the rich soil that had supported them through good years and bad. But now he saw it differently, like a soldier surveying a battlefield. Every rise and dip in the terrain, every structure and tree line, every possible approach and retreat route stood out in sharp relief. This land wasn't just his family's heritage anymore. It had become something else, a line in the sand, a place where justice would either prevail or fail. And Elijah Cross had never been one to let justice fail. The hardware store's bell jingled as Elijah pushed through the door. Morning sunlight streamed in behind him, casting his shadow across worn linoleum floors. He moved with purpose down each aisle, filling his cart with specific items: heavy-duty batteries, motion sensors, lengths of weatherproof wiring. At the electronics store next door, the young clerk's eyes widened at Elijah's list. 4 high-end drones with night vision capabilities, 6 trail cameras, and an array of long-range microphones. The total made the clerk whistle. "Starting a security company, sir?" he asked, scanning each item. "Something like that." Elijah's tone was pleasant but closed off further questions. Back at the farm, Caleb watched from the porch as his father's truck pulled up, the bed loaded with bags and boxes. He jumped up to help unload, lifting a drone box with reverent care. "This is some serious gear, Dad." Caleb turned the box over in his hands, studying the specs. "Military grade?" "Civilian version," Elijah corrected, pulling out more equipment. "But it'll do the job. Want to learn how to set it up?" Caleb's face lit up. "Really? Really?" Elijah handed him a trail camera. "First rule of defense: know your territory better than your enemy does." They worked through the morning heat, Elijah teaching Caleb the basics of surveillance placement. They mounted cameras in the old oak trees overlooking the access road, carefully concealing them among the branches. Motion sensors went on the gates and fence posts, connected to silent alarms that would ping their phones. "Remember," Elijah explained as they ran cable through PVC pipe to protect it from weather, "placement is critical. You want overlapping fields of view, no blind spots. Think like someone trying to sneak in. Where would you go?" Caleb nodded, absorbing every word. His hands, usually quick with phone apps and video games, proved just as skilled with the technical work. He picked up the drone controls faster than Elijah expected. Flying practice runs over the property with natural precision. Denise brought them water around noon, watching as they programmed the security systems hub on a laptop in the barn. Her face carried both pride and worry. "You two look like you're building mission control in here," she said, setting down the glasses. "Just don't get overconfident. Those deputies, they're not just bullies with badges. They've got friends in high places." Elijah looked up from the laptop screen. "That's exactly why we need this, honey. Can't fight what we can't see coming." "I know." Denise squeezed his shoulder. "Just remember they don't play by any rules. They'll hit us where it hurts if they can." "That's why we're covering every angle," Caleb said, adjusting a camera feed. "Look, we can see all the way to the county road now." The afternoon stretched on as they fine-tuned the system. Elijah showed Caleb how to access the feeds remotely through encrypted connections, how to store backup footage on secure cloud servers, how to monitor multiple cameras simultaneously. "Knowledge is power," Elijah said as they tested the motion sensors. "But it's also responsibility. We're not looking for a fight. We're gathering evidence. Everything we record could matter later." "Like in court?" Caleb asked, reviewing footage from their test runs. "Exactly." Elijah nodded. "The best weapon isn't always a gun. Sometimes it's proof." As sunset approached, they made final adjustments to the drone's night flight patterns. The quiet whir of its rotors barely registered above the evening crickets as it made slow circles over their land. Caleb had programmed it to follow random paths, making its movements unpredictable. Inside the kitchen, Elijah set up the main monitoring station on the table. 3 laptops displaying different camera angles, a tablet showing the drone's thermal imaging feed. Caleb pulled up a chair beside him, eyes bright with focus, as they watched the property's perimeter in crisp digital clarity. "Pretty impressive setup," Denise said, bringing them coffee. "Looks like one of those surveillance rooms from your action movies, Caleb." "Better," Caleb replied, not looking away from the screens. This one's real. The sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in deep purples and blues. On the thermal cameras, the cooling land turned dark, while warm-blooded creatures showed up as bright spots. Deer crossing the back field, raccoons investigating the compost pile, an owl swooping silently between trees. Elijah adjusted the drone's elevation, watching the road through its high-definition camera. Every passing car registered on their system now, its speed and direction logged automatically. No one could approach the farm without being seen, day or night. "First shift's yours," Elijah told Caleb, pointing to specific indicators on the screens. "Watch these patterns. Anything unusual, you wake me immediately." "Yes, sir." Caleb's voice carried the same quiet determination Elijah had heard in his own years ago during his first night watch, in far more dangerous places. The kitchen settled into focused silence, broken only by the soft hum of electronics and the occasional click of keys as Caleb logged routine observations. Through the windows, the drone's navigation lights blinked steadily against the darkening sky, a guardian making its endless rounds. Elijah's fingers moved across the laptop keyboard, scrolling through 2 days of surveillance footage. The kitchen table had become their command center, covered in notebooks and maps. Coffee grew cold in his mug as he leaned forward, studying the screen with laser focus. "There," he muttered, marking another timestamp. Deputy Hawthorne's cruiser appeared for the 3rd time that week, circling slowly past the Miller farm down the road. The pattern was becoming clear: systematic passes by different properties, always black-owned farms. Around midnight, the footage showed something else. 2 unmarked pickup trucks, mud-splattered to hide their plates, pulled off onto a logging road. Deputies' cruisers arrived minutes later. The thermal camera caught their heat signatures: 4 men talking in the darkness, passing something between them. Money? Documents? The resolution wasn't clear enough to tell. Denise came in from the garden, wiping soil from her hands. She paused behind Elijah's chair, watching the footage replay. "Found something?" she asked. "More than something." Elijah pointed to different clips. "They're not just harassing people randomly. Look at the timing, the routes. This is coordinated." He pulled up a county map on another screen, marking each farm they'd surveilled. Red dots formed a clear pattern: properties along the main water sources near planned development zones. "Earl Johnson's place is right in the middle of it," Denise said, tapping the screen. "Have you talked to him lately?" "Been meaning to check on him." Elijah stood, grabbing his keys. "Those deputies drove by his farm 6 times yesterday." The drive to Earl's place took 15 minutes down dusty back roads. The old farmer's property looked smaller than Elijah remembered. Fences needed mending, and several pastures stood empty. Earl himself sat in a wooden rocker on his porch, as weathered and sturdy as the oak boards beneath him. "Been wondering when you'd stop by," Earl called out as Elijah parked. His voice was thick with age, but still carried the sharp wit that had guided Elijah's father years ago. "Should have come sooner." Elijah climbed the creaking steps, accepting the offered seat next to Earl. "Heard you've been having trouble." Earl's laugh held no humor. "Trouble? That's one word for it. Lost 20 head of cattle last month. Gates opened in the night. Fences cut. Sheriff's Department said they'd look into it. Next thing I know, banks calling about missed payments." "They're targeting you," Elijah said quietly. "Been targeting all of us." Earl gestured toward distant farms. Thompson's place got hit with health code violations. Robert's family lost their equipment to asset seizure. Now they're claiming I can't prove those cattle were mine, even with the brands. Elijah's jaw tightened. "How long till foreclosure?" 30 days. Earl's fingers gripped his armrest. "Land's been in my family since Reconstruction." My grandfather paid for it 3 times over thanks to crooked bankers. Now they're trying to take it with badges instead of banks. Back at home, Denise worked the phones. Her old skills as a school administrator proved valuable. Organizing information, connecting people, documenting everything. By evening, she had filled 3 notebooks with similar stories from neighboring farms. "It's the same pattern everywhere," she told Elijah, spreading papers across their kitchen table. First come the citations: health code, property maintenance, livestock regulations. Then equipment gets vandalized or stolen. Finally, foreclosure notices arrive just when farmers are most vulnerable. Elijah studied the growing map of targeted properties. Red pins formed a web across the county, each representing a family fighting to keep their land. Some pins had dates beside them, foreclosure deadlines approaching like a tide of red ink. "They're picking us off one by one," he said, "using the law as a weapon." "Earl's not the only one running out of time," Denise added. "The Williams family has 2 weeks left. Jackson's maybe a month. Once these properties get seized, they'll be sold at auction before anyone can fight it in court." The drone feeds continued streaming on nearby screens, constant eyes watching over their community. As night fell, Elijah noticed movement on the eastern approach. Headlights appeared, moving slower than normal traffic. The vehicle crept along the county road, passed their front gate, then turned away without stopping. Elijah froze the frame, enhancing the image. The license plate stood out clearly in the infrared camera's view. He wrote down the numbers, adding them to their growing database of suspicious vehicles. "Got you," he whispered, marking the time and direction. Every piece of evidence mattered now. Their neighbors' lands, their heritage, their future, all of it hung by threads being cut one by one. But threads could also be woven into nets, and Elijah intended to catch every predator stalking their community. The drone's quiet hum continued overhead, its cameras recording through the darkness. On the wall, the map's red pins seemed to glow like warning lights, marking the battleground where an entire community's legacy would be won or lost. The county courthouse buzzed with quiet conversation as people filed into the monthly public meeting. Fluorescent lights cast a harsh glare over the wood-paneled walls and rows of metal folding chairs. Elijah sat near the back, a USB drive heavy in his pocket. Denise squeezed his hand, her eyes steady and determined. Sheriff Garvey sat at the front table with other county officials, his badge gleaming. Deputy Mason lounged against the wall, arms crossed, looking bored. Neither had noticed Elijah yet. The meeting droned through its usual agenda: budget reports, zoning requests, complaints about potholes. When the chairman finally called for public comments, Elijah stood. A few heads turned, recognizing him. Deputy Mason straightened, his casual stance becoming rigid. "My name is Elijah Cross," he began, voice clear and measured. "I'm here to address ongoing issues with our sheriff's department's treatment of local farmers." Sheriff Garvey's face tightened. Before he could interrupt, Elijah continued, "I have video evidence of deputy misconduct that this council needs to see." He walked to the projector setup, plugging in his drive. The room went quiet as the screen flickered to life. The timestamp showed 3 days ago. Earl Johnson's farm in broad daylight. The footage was crystal clear. Deputy Mason's cruiser pulled up to Earl's gate. The elderly farmer walked out to meet him, moving slowly with his cane. Their conversation was inaudible, but Earl's body language showed confusion, then anger, as Mason demanded to check his barn. When Earl tried to ask for a warrant, Mason grabbed him. The deputy's face twisted with contempt as he shoved the old man backward. Earl fell hard, his cane clattering away. Mason stood over him, hand on his weapon, shouting something while Earl struggled to get up. Gasps filled the room. A woman near the front covered her mouth. Two reporters from the local paper frantically scribbled notes. Sheriff Garvey's face had gone red. "This isn't an isolated incident," Elijah said into the stunned silence. "Mr. Johnson is 73 years old. He's farmed that land for 50 years. There was no warrant, no probable cause, just intimidation." More footage played. Mason's cruiser making repeated passes by the property. Late-night meetings with unmarked vehicles. Cattle gates mysteriously open the next morning. Each clip was time-stamped, documented. "Point of order!" Sheriff Garvey stood, his chair scraping back. "This is unauthorized surveillance footage. It has no place." "This is public comment time," Denise called out from her seat. "The rules say 5 minutes per speaker. He has 2 minutes left." Other voices joined in, demanding Elijah be allowed to finish. The chairman, looking uncomfortable, nodded for him to continue. "These actions are part of a pattern," Elijah said. His voice remained calm, but carried throughout the room. "Black farmers across this county have faced similar treatment. False citations, vandalism, suspicious foreclosures, all while certain developers wait to buy the land at auction." He played one final clip. Mason and another deputy laughing as they posted a foreclosure notice on Earl's Gate. The timestamp was yesterday. "This stops now," Elijah said. "Either the council investigates, or these videos go to state authorities and national media." He looked directly at Sheriff Garvey. "Your choice." Phones were out everywhere now, recording. The two reporters had moved closer, peppered Elijah with questions as he returned to his seat. Deputy Mason had vanished from his spot by the wall. The chairman called a 10-minute recess. As people clumped together, talking urgently, a young reporter from the county paper live-streamed the footage to social media. Within minutes, notifications began pinging across the room as the video spread. Sheriff Garvey stormed out, followed by his remaining deputies. Elijah watched them go, his face giving away nothing. Other farmers approached, sharing their own stories in hushed voices. Earl Johnson's daughter hugged Denise, tears in her eyes. Hours later, back home at their kitchen table, Elijah refreshed the video post. The view count had jumped again, 15,000 and climbing. Comments poured in, many from other rural communities sharing similar experiences. 3 news stations had requested interviews. Denise set fresh coffee beside him, resting her hand on his shoulder. Her small smile carried pride and hope. The footage played silently on his laptop. Earl struggling to stand while Mason towered over him. But now, the world was watching. Now, there were witnesses. "They can't hide it anymore," Denise said softly. Elijah nodded, covering her hand with his. The view counter ticked upward again. Each new number felt like a small victory, a crack in the wall of silence that had protected corruption for so long. For the first time since the deputies had first appeared on their farm, they felt the tide beginning to turn. Local news notifications popped up on his phone. The story was spreading, gaining momentum with every share and repost. Their quiet war for justice had finally found its voice. The question now was how their opponents would respond. The crackle of flames woke Elijah at 2 a.m. Smoke filled his nostrils before his eyes even opened. He bolted upright, already moving as Denise stirred beside him. "Fire!" he shouted, yanking on his boots. "Caleb, get up!" Through their bedroom window, orange light flickered against the night sky. The storage barn, where they kept their tractors and most expensive equipment, was engulfed in flames. The fire had already eaten through half the roof. Caleb burst out of his room, pulling on a jacket. "Dad!" "The animals first," Elijah ordered, his military training taking over. "Your mother will call 911. You take the north doors, I'll take the south." "Move!" They sprinted across the yard. Heat blasted their faces as they approached the burning structure. Inside, horses whinnied in panic, and their small herd of cattle bellowed. Smoke poured from every gap in the wooden walls. Elijah threw open the south doors while Caleb worked the north entrance. The horses bolted out as soon as they had a path. Elijah and Caleb drove the cattle through both exits, counting heads as the animals fled to the far pasture. "The equipment," Caleb started, moving toward the burning section. "No!" Elijah grabbed his son's arm. "Too late! The roof's about to go!" They backed away just as the center beam cracked with a thunderous sound. Sparks shot skyward as the roof collapsed inward. Their newest tractor, the seed spreader, and most of their mechanical equipment disappeared under the burning wreckage. Fire trucks arrived 15 minutes later, but by then there was little left to save. The firefighters focused on keeping the blaze from spreading to nearby structures. Elijah stood with his family, watching their livelihood burn. Denise wept quietly. Caleb's fists were clenched at his sides. Dawn broke over the smoking ruins. The fire marshal walked the scene, noting the strong smell of accelerant. "This was deliberate," he said, though his eyes didn't meet Elijah's. "We'll investigate, but—" His voice trailed off. Everyone knew nothing would come of it. Caleb left for school despite Denise's protests, refusing to let them win by hiding. "I'll be fine, Mom," he insisted. "They can't touch me there." 2 hours later, Elijah's phone rang. It was the school principal, voice tight with forced professionalism. "Mr. Cross, there's been an incident. The police found substances in Caleb's truck. They're taking him into custody." Elijah's grip nearly cracked his phone. "What substances?" "Methamphetamine, sir. A significant amount." The drive to the school was a blur. Elijah and Denise arrived to find police cars in the parking lot, students filming with their phones as deputies led Caleb away in handcuffs. Deputy Mason stood by Caleb's truck, holding up a clear bag of crystals he'd discovered during his search. "Look what we found," Mason sneered as they approached. "Seems like someone's been busy." "That's not mine," Caleb shouted. "They planted it." "Dad, you know I'd never—" "Shut it, kid." Mason grabbed Caleb's arm roughly. "You have the right to remain silent. Use it." Denise moved forward, but Elijah held her back. His face was expressionless, but his eyes burned as they followed every movement, every face, every detail of the scene. He watched them put his son in the back of a patrol car, memorizing badge numbers and license plates. At the station, they refused to let them see Caleb. The booking officer smiled coldly as he read the charges. "Possession with intent to distribute. That's a felony. Bail hearings tomorrow morning." Outside, reporters had already gathered. Local news vans lined the street, cameras rolling as a reporter spoke into her microphone. Following recent allegations against the sheriff's department, police have uncovered possible gang activity at the center of the controversy. The son of Elijah Cross, who recently accused deputies of harassment, was arrested today with a large quantity of illegal drugs. Denise broke down in the car, her sobs echoing in the confined space. "Our baby. They're going to ruin his life. Everything we built. Everything we fought for." Elijah sat rigid in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead. His silence was deeper than words, colder than ice. His mind catalogued and calculated resources, contacts, contingencies. The tactician in him, the part that had led men through the world's worst places, was already mapping out the next phase of this war. The sun sank toward the horizon as they sat in the county jail parking lot. The building loomed before them, red brick turned crimson in the dying light. Denise had cried herself quiet beside him. Elijah's voice, when it finally came, was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of an absolute promise. "You just made the worst mistake of your lives." The clock struck midnight as Elijah sat alone in his home office, the blue glow of his laptop screen illuminating his face. His fingers moved deliberately across the keyboard, entering a series of complex passwords he hadn't used in years. The encrypted contact list appeared, names and numbers of men he'd trusted with his life in places too dangerous to mention. Denise was finally asleep, exhausted from crying. The house felt too quiet without Caleb's music playing upstairs or his footsteps in the hallway. The empty silence fueled Elijah's resolve. He clicked the first number. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. Sam Ortiz speaking. Sam, it's Cross. A pause, then, Commander? Been a minute. What's wrong? Elijah's voice remained steady as he explained the situation. The harassment, the burning barn, his son in jail on planted evidence. Sam listened without interrupting. Those backwoods losers, Sam finally said. They have no idea who they're messing with, do they? What do you need? Your skills, digital surveillance, network infiltration. The sheriff's department is running something bigger than simple harassment. I need proof. I'll catch the first flight out. Send me the details. The second call went to Daniel Hawkins. Unlike Sam's quick response, Hawk answered with characteristic silence, listening to every word before speaking. Targeting your family, Hawk said finally. That crosses every line. I need eyes on them, Hawk. Your kind of eyes. Track their movements, their meetings, everything they try to hide. Consider it done. I'll be there by morning. The last number belonged to Reggie Miles. Despite the late hour, Reggie answered alert and ready. Commander Cross. Man, I was just thinking about that time in... Reggie, Elijah cut him off gently. I need your help. As Elijah outlined the situation, Reggie's usual chatter fell away. They're using badges to steal land? And they locked up your boy? Oh, hell no. I'm in. Nobody messes with one of ours like that. I need your talent for getting into places, Reggie. Make friends, plant bugs, gather intel. Think you can still play the friendly stranger? Please. That's like asking if I remember how to breathe. Text me the address. I'll grab my gear and hit the road. After the calls, Elijah opened a new document. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he detailed his initial strategy. The plan took shape in precise military format. Phase 1, intelligence gathering. Phase 2, evidence collection. Phase 3, sting operation. The outline continued with contingencies and backup plans, escape routes and safe houses, the kind of thorough tactical planning that had kept his men alive in combat zones. Elijah worked through the night, stopping only to make coffee and check his phone for updates about Caleb. Around 5 a.m., he heard vehicles approaching. Not patrol cars this time. He recognized the distinct sound of a Jeep's engine, followed by 2 more vehicles. He stepped onto the porch just as the sun began to rise. 3 vehicles pulled up to his house, a black Jeep Wrangler, a dark blue Ford pickup, and a silver SUV. The men who stepped out looked ordinary enough. No one would guess they were among the most skilled operators he'd ever commanded. Sam Ortiz emerged from the Jeep, laptop bag slung over his shoulder, his usual grin replaced by focused determination. Hawk slid silently from the pickup, his eyes already scanning the property perimeter. Reggie hopped out of the SUV, stretching after the long drive. Movement upstairs caught Elijah's attention. Caleb stood at his window, staring down at the arrival of these strangers who moved with unmistakable military precision. Even from a distance, Elijah could see the mix of curiosity and hope on his son's face. The 3 men approached the porch. No words were needed, as Elijah met each one with the same greeting, a firm handshake that spoke of shared battles and absolute trust. Each grip held for a moment, longer than normal, acknowledging that once again, they were going to war together. Welcome to the farm, gentlemen, Elijah said quietly. Caleb appeared in the doorway behind him, watching in silence as these ordinary-looking men formed a loose circle on their porch. In the growing morning light, his father stood at their center, no longer just the careful farmer he knew, but something else, a commander preparing his team for battle. The morning sun streamed through the dining room windows as Elijah and his team gathered around the table. Coffee cups dotted the wooden surface between spread-out county maps and surveillance photos. The smell of Denise's fresh-baked biscuits filled the air, a homey contrast to the serious work ahead. Sam sat with his laptop open, fingers dancing across the keyboard. 3 additional screens showed scrolling data as he dug into the county's records. "Their security is a joke," he muttered, shaking his head. "Basic encryption, outdated firewalls. They're not even trying to hide it well." Hawk stood behind Caleb, teaching him how to mark patrol patterns on a map. "See how they circle these properties?" he said quietly, pointing to 3 farms highlighted in red. "They're establishing presence, creating pressure. Classic intimidation tactics." "Like they did with us," Caleb said, his jaw tight. "Exactly. But now we use their pattern against them." Hawk handed Caleb a small rangefinder. "This will help you track distances and movement from safe observation points." Reggie spread out his collection of disguised recording devices on the table. "Already got my cover story worked out," he grinned, holding up a fake ID badge for a radio repair company. "Sheriff's office put in a work order last week for their communications system. Lucky timing." Denise sat at her laptop, organizing a spreadsheet of farmer contacts. "The Johnsons agreed to give statements," she reported. "And the Williamses, too. That's 8 families now with documented harassment cases." "Good," Elijah nodded. "We need everything on record." Sam suddenly whistled low. "Got something here, Commander. Looking at property transfers over the last 18 months. Every seized farm got sold within weeks to shell companies, all tied back to a development firm called Southern Heritage Properties." His screen showed a web of transactions. "And guess who sits on their board? Sheriff Garvey's brother-in-law." "Send me those records," Elijah said. "We'll need clean copies for evidence." Caleb studied the surveillance map with growing confidence. "We should put cameras here and here," he pointed. "That's where they usually park when they're watching our place." "Good eye," Hawk approved. "Always watch where they watch from." Reggie packed his gear into an unassuming repair van. "I'll be in and out of that sheriff's office before lunch. They'll never spot these babies." He held up a microphone disguised as a power outlet cover. State-of-the-art and completely wireless. Denise's phone buzzed. "Earl Johnson says 2 deputies just showed up at his place again. Should we send someone to watch?" "I'm on it," Hawk said, already heading for the door. "Caleb, grab your gear. Time for some real-world practice." As morning turned to afternoon, the team settled into their roles. Sam created secure folders for each piece of evidence, teaching Caleb some basic digital forensics. "Always maintain the chain of custody," he explained. "Every file needs to be authenticated." Reggie returned from his repair job with a satisfied smile. "Bugs are in place. Got one in Garvey's office, one in the break room, and one by the evidence lockup. They never questioned a thing." Denise coordinated a meeting with affected farmers at their church, away from prying eyes. "We need to be careful," she reminded everyone. "These people are risking everything to speak up." Hour by hour, the evidence grew. Sam uncovered more fraudulent transfers, each one linking back to the same network of shell companies. Hawk and Caleb photographed suspicious meetings behind the county courthouse. Reggie's hidden microphones picked up increasingly incriminating conversations. As evening fell, Denise served dinner to the team. The dining room table had become a command center, with laptops, maps, and documents covering every inch. They ate while reviewing the day's findings, planning next steps, identifying weak points in the sheriff's operation. "They're getting sloppy," Hawk observed, showing photos of deputies meeting with known property developers. Too comfortable in their routine. "Pride comes before the fall," Reggie quoted, reaching for another biscuit. Sam's laptop pinged. New audio file coming in from the sheriff's office. Bugs. He plugged in speakers as everyone gathered around. Sheriff Garvey's voice filled the room, casual and cold. "Johnson's place should be ready to move on next week. Same deal as the others. 30 grand up front. Another 50 when the deed transfers." Another voice. "What about the Cross farm?" "That's different," Garvey said. "Cross is dangerous. We need to handle him special. Break him down first, then—" Elijah's hand was steady as he pressed the save button on the audio file, but his eyes had turned to steel. The recording was exactly what they needed. Clear evidence of conspiracy and corruption. But hearing them discuss his family so callously made his jaw clench. "Got it backed up to 3 secure servers," Sam confirmed quietly. Denise touched Elijah's shoulder. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They had proof now. Irrefutable proof of the sheriff's crimes. The next phase could begin. The wooden pews of Mount Zion Baptist Church filled quickly that Wednesday evening. Denise stood at the pulpit, her usual quiet demeanor replaced by focused determination as she arranged the microphone. Community members filed in, farmers, teachers, shop owners, their whispers echoing off the high ceiling. Caleb set up his camera equipment near the front, making sure every angle was covered. 2 local news crews had already stationed themselves along the walls, their bright lights casting long shadows across the worn floorboards. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Denise began, her voice steady despite the crowd. "We're here because what's happening in our county can't stay hidden anymore. Every person who speaks tonight has a story that needs to be heard." Earl Johnson went first, his weathered hands gripping the podium. "Been farming that land 43 years, he said, voice cracking. "My daddy farmed it before me. Then last month, they claim I'm missing 6 head of cattle. I know I never lost. Next thing, there's liens and fines I never knew about." The cameras rolled as more farmers stepped forward. Sarah Williams described deputies trespassing on her property at night. Marcus Turner showed photos of his vandalized equipment. Each story built on the last, revealing a clear pattern of harassment and intimidation. "They said my irrigation system was illegally modified," James Foster testified, his wife nodding beside him. "Gave me 24 hours to fix violations that didn't exist. When I argued, they arrested my son for interfering with an investigation." In the back of the church, Hawk discreetly filmed the audience, documenting who came and went. 2 of Sheriff Garvey's plainclothes deputies had slipped in, thinking themselves unnoticed. Their presence only proved how important this meeting was. Caleb's phone buzzed with supportive messages from his classmates. Word was spreading through the school about what really happened. His media club friends had started an online campaign questioning the drug charges, sharing clips from earlier protests against police corruption. "My son was targeted too," Denise said when the testimonies finished. "They planted evidence, tried to ruin his future. But we won't let them destroy our children's lives or steal the land we worked so hard for." The local reporters pressed forward, microphones extended. "Mrs. Cross, are you saying the sheriff's department is deliberately targeting black-owned farms?" "The evidence speaks for itself," she replied calmly. "Look at the pattern. Look at the property records. Ask yourself who benefits when our farms are seized and sold." More questions followed, but Denise kept her answers measured and precise, just as Elijah had advised. Don't give them anything to twist. Let the facts tell the story. Outside the church, Elijah watched the parking lot from his truck, scanning for any signs of retaliation. The sheriff's men were getting desperate. Public sentiment was turning against them as more people connected the dots. His phone lit up with a text from Sam. "Sheriff's office going crazy. Multiple calls to lawyers and developers. They know they're exposed. Reggie's message followed. Bugs picked up Garvey, ordering all files moved off-site, starting to cover tracks. The town hall lasted nearly 3 hours. When it finally ended, people lingered in small groups, sharing more stories, exchanging numbers, building the network of resistance that Denise had carefully cultivated. "You did good, Mom," Caleb said, as they packed up the camera equipment. "This is going to wake people up." "It's just the beginning," she replied, hugging him close. "But at least now they know they're not alone." Elijah drove them home along dark country roads, watching for tail lights in his mirrors. The night felt charged with possibility and danger. They had landed a solid blow, but the sheriff's department still held power. They could still hurt people. Back at the farm, Hawk's surveillance feeds showed increased patrol activity around targeted properties. The deputies were agitated, their routine disrupted by the public exposure. "They're scared," Sam observed, monitoring police radio chatter. "Making mistakes." Caleb edited footage from the town hall late into the night, his determination matching his father's focus. The finished video would be impossible to ignore. Dozens of voices speaking truth to power, backed by documents and data. Denise sat with Elijah on the porch, both of them too wired to sleep. "I saw people finding their courage tonight," she said softly. "Standing together instead of suffering alone." "You gave them that strength," he replied, squeezing her hand. His phone rang just past midnight. Major Price's number lighting up the screen. "We've got enough," Price said without preamble. "Time to move." The abandoned warehouse sat dark and silent on the outskirts of town. Dust motes danced in thin beams of afternoon light, filtering through grimy windows. Elijah crouched behind a stack of wooden crates, his earpiece quietly crackling with radio chatter. Sam and Hawk were positioned near the loading dock, while Reggie monitored the surveillance feed from a van across the street. FBI Special Agent Diana Martinez knelt beside Elijah, checking her vest straps. "Your intel was solid," she whispered. "Everything matches the pattern. Same time, same location they've used before." Elijah nodded, his eyes fixed on the side entrance. 6 other federal agents waited in the shadows, weapons ready, but out of sight. They needed the exchange to happen before moving in. "Target vehicles approaching," Reggie's voice came through the earpiece. 3 SUVs, matches the sheriff's department plates. Through the warehouse windows, they watched the vehicles pull up. Sheriff Garvey stepped out first, followed by Deputies Carver, Mason, Hawthorne, and Wilson. A black Mercedes arrived moments later. James Davidson, the developer who'd been buying up seized properties at fraction of their worth. "Remember," Agent Martinez said into her radio, "we wait for the physical exchange. We need it on camera." Caleb's handiwork was evident in the warehouse setup. Hidden cameras covered every angle, their feeds streaming directly to FBI servers. No evidence could disappear this time. The warehouse door creaked open. Sheriff Garvey's boots echoed on the concrete floor as he led his group inside. Davidson followed, carrying a sleek briefcase. "Let's make this quick," Davidson said, his voice picking up clearly on the microphones. "I've got the cash. You have the deeds?" "Right here." Garvey patted a manila envelope. 7 properties, all clean and clear. Previous owners won't be causing any more trouble. "The Cross Farm?" Davidson asked. "Working on it," Carver cut in. "Had a setback, but we've got the kid on charges. Father will fold soon enough." Elijah's jaw tightened, but he remained perfectly still. They needed more. Davidson opened his briefcase, stacks of bills visible in the dim light. 200,000, as agreed, plus 50 extra for expediting the Johnson and Williams properties. "Show me those deeds first," Davidson said, reaching for the envelope. Garvey spread the documents on a dusty table. Property transfers, court orders, foreclosure notices, all fabricated to appear legal. "Everything looks in order," Davidson said, sliding the briefcase across. "Pleasure doing business." The moment Garvey's hand touched the money, Agent Martinez's voice cut through the warehouse. "FBI! Everyone on the ground!" Agents burst from their positions, weapons drawn. Hawk and Sam blocked the exits while federal officers swarmed in. "Tom Garvey," Martinez announced. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, civil rights violations, and criminal enterprise." The sheriff's face drained of color as agents zip-tied his hands. His deputies stood frozen, realizing too late they were surrounded. "You son of a—" Garvey spat when he spotted Elijah emerging from the shadows. "You set this up." "No," Elijah replied calmly. "You did this to yourself." News vans screeched to a halt outside, alerted by an anonymous tip. Cameras rolled as FBI agents led the handcuffed men out into the sunlight. Davidson tried hiding his face, but there was no escape from the footage that would lead every broadcast that night. Elijah watched from the warehouse door as Reggie's van pulled away, heading to the courthouse where Caleb's hearing was about to begin. With the sheriff in custody and the conspiracy exposed, the drug charges wouldn't stand. The afternoon sun was bright after the warehouse darkness. Reporters shouted questions as agents loaded their prisoners into waiting vehicles. Local farmers began arriving, drawn by the news spreading like wildfire through the community. Earl Johnson stood at the edge of the crowd, tears in his eyes as he watched his tormentors being taken away. Other families gathered, holding each other, finally seeing justice done. Outside the courthouse steps across town, Denise paced nervously until the doors opened. Caleb emerged, a wide smile breaking across his face. The charges had been dropped, his record cleared. "Mom!" he called out, running down the steps. Denise caught him in a fierce hug, her shoulders shaking with relief. Around them, supporters cheered and called out congratulations. Elijah arrived just in time to see Sheriff Garvey and his deputies being led up the courthouse steps in chains, now facing their own charges. News cameras swiveled between the fallen sheriff and the family he'd tried to destroy. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. A corrupt system's power crumbling while an honest family stood strong, surrounded by their community. Through his earpiece, Elijah heard Agent Martinez. "FBI secured all files from the sheriff's office, found records going back 5 years. This is bigger than we thought." Garvey caught Elijah's eye as deputies loaded him into a prisoner transport van. The sheriff's face was a mask of fury and defeat, knowing his carefully built empire had been dismantled by the very man he'd tried to break. Morning dew sparkled on fresh-cut grass as people gathered under the sprawling oak tree at the Cross Farm. Folding chairs formed a circle, while card tables held coffee urns and Denise's famous peach cobbler. The scent of new wood from the rebuilt barn mixed with the earthy smell of fall approaching. Earl Johnson sat with his grandson, pointing out improvements made since the community pitched in to restore his cattle fencing. Other farmers who'd nearly lost everything to the sheriff's scheme now discussed forming a legal defense fund. Their voices carried across the yard, strong, unafraid, planning for the future. "We're thinking of calling it the Cross-County Agricultural Cooperative," Martha Williams announced, unfolding a draft charter. "If everyone agrees, that is." Denise blushed at the suggestion. "It should be named for all of us," she said, but the group insisted. After all, the Cross family's stand had exposed the corruption and brought them together. Caleb moved through the crowd with his camera, documenting the meeting for his growing archive. The scholarship committee had been impressed by his footage of the sting operation, but it was his interviews with affected families that sealed the deal. Full ride to journalism school, his mother hadn't stopped smiling for days. "Got everything set for D.C. next week?" Sam asked Denise, helping himself to more coffee. She nodded, still amazed at the invitation to keynote the Agricultural Justice Conference. "Speech is ready. though public speaking isn't exactly my comfort zone. You'll do great, Reggie assured her. Those politicians need to hear from someone who actually lived through this. Near the barn, Hawk and Elijah leaned against the new wall, watching the gathering. Tools and lumber were still scattered around, evidence of the community rebuild that had brought neighbors together every weekend for the past month. Reminds me of that village in Kosovo, Hawk said quietly. Remember? After we cleared the militia out? Elijah nodded. People coming together, rebuilding, standing watch over each other. Different kind of mission here, Sam added, joining them. But same principle. Protect what matters. Speaking of protection, Reggie chimed in, that security system we installed is top-notch. Cameras, motion sensors, the works. Nobody's sneaking up on this place again. Elijah smiled. Appreciate you boys sticking around to help set everything right. Wouldn't have missed it, Sam replied. Besides, watching those deputies do the perp walk was worth the trip alone. They shared knowing looks, remembering the satisfaction of seeing justice served. The federal investigation was still expanding, uncovering similar schemes in neighboring counties. But here, in this community, healing had already begun. Caleb approached with his camera. Hey, Dad, can I get a shot of you guys for the documentary epilogue? The four men straightened up, falling naturally into familiar formation. Brothers in arms, even in civilian clothes. Your boy's got talent, Hawk said, after Caleb moved on. Good eye for detail. Would have made a hell of an operator. He'll make a better journalist, Elijah replied. World needs truth-tellers as much as warriors. The meeting shifted to lunch, people spreading blankets on the grass. Children played tag between the adults, while teenagers helped set out food. The scene could have been from any normal gathering, except for the subtle signs of what they'd overcome. A farmer's arm still in a cast from a deputy's rough handling, newly installed security lights on every barn. Denise called everyone to attention standing by the oak tree. I want to thank you all for being here today. What we've built goes beyond a legal cooperative. We've created a family, and families protect their own. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. She continued, growing more confident with each word. Next week in Washington, I'll tell them about our fight, about how we stood together against intimidation and corruption. But more importantly, I'll tell them about this, about community rising stronger from adversity. Applause broke out, genuine and warm. Elijah watched his wife with pride, seeing how naturally she'd stepped into her role as a leader. The quiet school administrator had found her voice. Later, as the sun began to set, the gathering wound down. People headed home with leftover cobbler and renewed purpose. The cooperative was more than a legal entity. It was a shield against future threats, a network of support and vigilance. Hawk, Sam, and Reggie said their goodbyes, promising to return for the Harvest Festival. Each hugged Denise and shook hands with Caleb before turning to Elijah. Take care of your command, sir, Hawk said with a slight smile. Copy that, Elijah replied, embracing each of his old teammates. As stars began appearing in the darkening sky, the Cross family cleaned up together, moving with the comfortable rhythm of people who knew their roles. Caleb reviewed footage on his camera, while Denise packed away leftovers. Elijah secured the barn, checking locks and sensors out of habit. The next morning, before dawn painted the sky, Elijah stood at his favorite spot along the fence line. The air was crisp, carrying promises of autumn. He heard familiar footsteps approaching. Denise appeared beside him, wrapping her hand around his. Together they watched the first rays of sunlight spill across their fields, painting everything in shades of gold. We're home, she said simply. Elijah nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon, calm, ready, and unshakable. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.